let's come back to him, Mark.
Okay. Representative Schmidt,
Here.
Representative Tarver,
Here.
Representative Weber,
Here.
Chairman Heiner,
Here.
Representative Riggins, can you hear us now?
I can hear you now. Thank you.
And
Here.
thank you.
Everybody accounted for, Mark?
Yes.
All right, thank you. All right, we're going to start off with House Bill 10, which is limited mining operations amendments, and House Bill 15. We're going to listen to those jointly because they're very related. 15 is bonding amendments for limited mining operations. So our Director Parfit, would you, and Brandy O'Brien will be here to enlighten us about these two bills.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Parfit, Director of the Department of Environmental Quality. I'm going to provide just a quick 30,000-foot view of these two bills and then turn it over to Administrator O'Brien to walk you through the bills. Both these bills are actually House Bill 10 was discussed last year, and it was Senate File 44. And the decision that last year was to move that to the interim. And so both of these bills were discussed during the interim with the Minerals Committee. The House Bill 10 does 5 high-level things. First, it expands the applicability of limited mine operations to include all non-coal minerals except minerals regulated by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And there are specific purposes and methods in House Bill 10 for the use of LMOs for that purpose. I thought it would be good to just talk about what is an LMO, a limited mining operation. So what we have is there are limited mining operations, there are small mines, and there are large mines. What a limited mining operation is described at currently in the statute is it's limited to 15 acres of affected land, excluding access roads, with written permission of the landowner or lessee of the surface. Notice must be provided to the DEQ and the state mine inspector 30 days prior to the mining. A copy of the notice must be provided to all surface owners within 1 mile of the proposed boundary of the LMO at least 30 days before commencing operations. The operator must notify the DEQ of the date commencement of the mining began within 30 days of commencement of operation. And the affected lands shall not be within 300 feet of any existing occupied dwelling, home, public building, school, church, community, or institutional building, park, or cemetery unless the landowner's consent has been obtained. A bond must be filed with the DEQ prior to the commencement of the LMO, and then the operator must submit an annual report to the DEQ. So that's what a limited mining operation is. It is not a permit, it's a notification. So if they provide that information, then they can move forward. And that's an important distinction as we're having the conversation is there is no permit. It is a notification. So with that, the second thing that the House Bill 10 does is it amends the bond amounts to better cover the costs associated with a forfeiture. And there were some changes made to grandfather existing operations in. So the increased bond amounts in House Bill 10 would only apply for LMOs after July 1, 2025. The third thing it does is it provides consistency for timelines for agency and operator actions. It codifies existing rule actions regarding LMOs, for example, location standards, and it eliminates the small mining category, again, grandfathering those existing small mine operations So the elimination of the small mining category would occur on anything after July 1 of 2025. Existing small mines would continue to operate with their existing small mine permit. So then going forward, what you'd have is just two categories: limited mining operations and mines. And then House Bill 15 is a truncated version of House Bill 10, which includes only the bonding adjustments that are in House Bill 10. Everything else is excluded. With that, Mr. Chairman, I'll turn it over to Administrator O'Brien to walk you through the bills.
Thank you, Director. Administrator O'Brien, welcome. Good morning to you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, so I'll start with walking through House Bill 10. I'll just go page by page of the changes. If you go to page 2, lines 10 through 15, what this does is it expands the existing aggregate LMO categories to all non-coal minerals, with the exception of uranium or thorium that's regulated by Wyoming's Agreement State Program with the NRC. If you go to pages 3 through 4, lines 14 through 22 on page 3 and lines 1 and 2 of page 4, what this does is for existing LMO categories that are not mined from quarries, this grandfathers in LMOs that have commenced operations prior to July 1st, 2025 to the existing bond amount of $2,000 per acre of affected land, including roads to access the mining operations. And this came out of discussion in the interim to allow for existing facilities that have based their business decisions on that $2,000 per acre bond amount, allowing them to remain bonded at this amount. There is a note here that on line 18, on page 3, we actually need to add limestone to this list. It was just inadvertently not added to this. So that should also include limestone between scoria and dolomite. And then if you go to page 4, lines 4 through 7, this is for those existing LMO categories that are not mined from quarries, commencing operations after July 1st, 2025. It requires a bond of $5,000 per acre of affected lands, and this includes roads, access roads in the affected land acreage. And the bond amounts for LMOs were last adjusted in 2014, so this is adjusting for inflation. If you go to page 4, lines 9 through 10, this grandfathers in LMOs for quarries that have commenced operations prior to July 1st, 2025, to the bond amount of $3,000 per acre of affected lands. Page 4, lines 15 through 19, so any LMOs for quarries commencing operations after July 1st, 2025 will require a bond amount of $7,000 per acre of affected lands. And again, the last time this was updated was in 2014, so this is adjusting for inflation. If you go to the bottom of page 4 and the top of page 5, so lines 21 through 22 on page 4 and lines 1 through 2 on page 5, this allows existing LMO categories, including quarries, to use either the per acre bonding rates that were specified earlier or a full cost bond. So this would be, an engineering bond calculation, and the LQD would accept whichever is lower. And so for operators that, perhaps the type of mining that they are proposing, would not meet those values specified in that per acre bond amount, it gives them the flexibility to post a lower bond and for the state to still have the appropriate bonds necessary in the case of forfeiture. And if we go to page 5, lines 4 through 6, this requires all new coal mine mineral categories, for example, gold, lithium, nickel, et cetera, to only use full cost bonding. The existing LMOs did not contemplate this type of mining, and so in order to protect the state's interests, it would require full cost bonding calculations. If you go to page 5, lines 8 through 9, so in the event that unforeseen or unanticipated conditions warrant an additional bond to protect the interest of the state, the time that the land quality administrator has to adjust bonds for an LMO is increased from 90 days to 150 days, and this is to be consistent with existing review times that the Land Quality Division has. And then if you go to page 5, line 14, it increases the time that an operator has to post any additional bond necessary. It goes from 30 days to 45 days. And again, this is to be consistent with existing requirements for other types of operations. When we issue a director's bond letter, we typically give operators 45 days to post that additional bond. If you go to page 5, lines 19 through 21, this changes the reporting timeframe for the operator to notify the administrator for commencement of reclamation from the currently, which is in the annual report, and now requiring for operators to plan for commencement of reclamation within 45 days of operations having ceased. If you go to page 6, lines 4 through 8, this clarifies the categories of non-coal minerals that are eligible for reclamation deferment if the landowner has use for and authorizes the delay in reclamation in writing to the department. So say that there's a road that is useful to the landowner, they have the ability to not have to reclaim that if they have landowner permission. If you go to page 6, lines 19 through 20, this provides a reference to the 5-year renewal provisions in 3511 401K. If you go to the bottom of page 6 and the top of page 7, lines 22 through 23 on page 6 and lines 1 through 9 on page 7, it states for any new types of LMOs created by this bill, it only allows LMOs for the purposes of proving or evaluating a mineral deposit for subsequent mining operations, and it does not allow for leaching mining. So when it talks about mechanical mining, there's no leach type mining allowed for, with LMOs. If you go to pages 7 and 8, the lines 11 through 22 on page 7 and lines 1 through 2 on page 8, what this does is it codifies existing LMO requirements that are in the Land Quality Division's non-coal Chapter 10. If you go to page 8, lines 17 through 23, this grandfathers existing small mine permits and eliminates new small mine permits. And so going forward, the LQD would no longer issue small mine permits, and operators would have to either get an LMO or a regular permit to mine. And this would help streamline the LQD process. If you go to page 9, lines 8 through 10, this codifies reporting requirements of mineral production sold during the past year. It would be a requirement in the annual report, and the data is for the Department of Revenue. If you go to the bottom of page 9, top of page 10, so page 9, lines 12 through 22, and page 10, lines 1 through 15, this codifies the existing LMO 5-year term renewal rights and provisions that are existing in land quality rules. And then if you go to page 11, lines 7 through 12, this codifies the existing bond release practices for LMO operations, which is 2 successful growing seasons to establish permanent cover and surface interest consultation. And then page 11, 19 through 23, it also codifies that same thing within the release of bonds section. And here I can either stop for questions or go on to House Bill 15.
Thank you, Administrator O'Brien. Any questions on this? Representative Knapp, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Administrator, do you have any specific examples of closures within the last, say, 3 years that link to the bond requirement in cost?
Administrator O'Brien.
I apologize. I am very fresh to the job and I do not have these examples.
Director, maybe you could lend some information.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, yeah, we have a couple of examples where we had bid out on some forfeitures, and the cost was $19,950 on the bid, higher than what we had in bond under the current structure. And then we had, so the example is it was about a 7-acre operation. It was bonded at $2,000 per acre. If we had bonded it at $5,000 per acre, we would have been within $1,000 of the actual reclamation cost rather than $19,000 on the short. So that's one example, and we have another example where the shortage was about $5,000 on a 3.7 acre reclamation. And had we had the 5,000 per acre rate, we would have been within $50 of the actual cost.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Thank you for coming prepared with that information. That's great. Any other questions? Co-chair or Vice Chair Tarver.
This is just a curious question. What would be considered a successful growing season?
Administrator O'Brien.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Tarver, keep in mind I'm a nuclear engineer, not a vegetative specialist, but it has to show that the vegetation is taking, and we have vegetation specialists that will go out and ensure that appropriate growth is taking place. And I cannot give you more details than that.
Vice Chair, any other follow-up? That's good. All right. Representative Knapp, and then we'll do Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On page 7, bottom on the page, line 1822, is that basically to prevent what would be called daisy chaining with mines?
Administrator O'Brien.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Knapp, that's correct. And that is an existing requirement in our rules, and it's just placing that within statute.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is, under limited mining, it says that limited mining operations, whether commercial or non-commercial, are excluded, but 15 acres or less. I know that there's a lot of recreational miners that have, a claim, generally a claim is 20 acres or more. So would they be liable for the full bonding amount as a small-scale miner under that effect?
Administrator O'Brien.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Campbell, there are different types. There's exploration licenses and that sort of thing, but depending on the operation, I do believe it would be a full cost bond, and with that would be under a permit to mine.
Follow-up?
Thank you very, very much. No follow-up, Mr. Chairman.
Any further questions? I've got a couple of questions, Administrator O'Brien. So with this bill, we have small mining permits, and with this proposed bill here, then the LMO would encompass all of these small, what would previously be a small mining permit. Could you compare a small mining permit to an LMO? What are the differences there between the two?
So an LMO is just a notification, and a small mine permit is actually an application process. So that goes out to public notice and, subject to the EQC. And it takes about a year to get a small mine permit typically on average. And then an LMO takes, I believe, on average, around 90 days for approval. So anyone that would be, over that 15-acre limit would be subject to a permit to mine going forward, as opposed to a small mine permit, which would also be subject to the public notice period and, is a permit as opposed to a notification.
Director, you appear to want to say something.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, one of the, or some of the requirements for small mines is that they can have no more than 35,000 yards of overburden, excluding topsoil. And then they can only affect 10 acres of land in any given year, excluding roads. So there are some requirements on the small mines that would go away, and then it would be, most of those would get wrapped up into large mine requirements. And there are very few differences other than what I've read here, maybe a little bit on the reclamation side of things, but they're very similar other than that. And as Ms. O'Brien mentioned, the difference between an LMO and a permit is the LMOs, there is no public comment period. It's just the notification to the landowners and the siting in the area.
Thank you. So Director, the advantages of an LMO, it expedites the requirements to be able to begin mining. There is notification within a mile, but there's no comment period from the public where they can weigh in on this. So just, you begin this meeting flying at 30,000 feet. Let's go back to that level. Tell us what the benefits are to your department as well as for the public and the mining operations. What's the overall benefit of this piece of legislation?
Well, the benefit would be, from an administrative standpoint, it would be more efficient to oversee the mining activity because you wouldn't have the small mine category in verifying the disturbing no more than 10,000 yards in a given year and the overburden, et cetera. So everything would be just a mine permit. So that would simplify things on that end. On the other end, where you go to the limited mining operation, there truly would be some just practical limits as to what you could do for the non-mineral, the addition of the non-coal minerals other than the sand and gravel and quarries. You're limited because you have to do your whole operation within that 15-acre site. And so with your overburden taking up probably half of the acreage, you're going to be limited anyway as to how much exploration you can do. And I think that's why when you reference the change in the House Bill 10, it lays out what you can use LMO for those other non-coal minerals to prove out a resource so that then you can decide if you want to go to a mine operation or not, a full-scale mine operation.
Thank you, Administrator. Or Director, I'm sorry. Thank you. So these small mining operation that we have right now, if we go with this, the small mining permits will go away, but that will move into mining permits, not necessarily into LMO. Is that correct?
Mr. Chairman, that is correct.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Director. So am I getting the sense then on using this as kind of, it expedites exploration to a certain extent, and the fact that they can go in, basically they can go in and prospect on a very small scale faster and cheaper than actually filing for a mining permit on non-coal minerals? Is that kind of the gist of this?
Director?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Campbell, yeah, I think that's at a high level, that's correct. Yeah. And the other thing not to lose sight of is the bonding adjustments as well.
Of course. Follow up?
No further questions. Thank you, guys.
Representative Schmidt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Director, you said there were some restrictions in here when it comes to structures and that, and where these mines can be placed and opened. What about any kind of like wildlife issues, anything like that? What kind of restrictions are operators need to be aware of?
Director?
So, Mr. Chairman and Representative Schmidt, the one that comes to mind would be sage grouse and the executive order on sage grouse. If it's in core area, the entity would need to work with the Game and Fish Department to determine what mitigation measures might need to take place. And I suspect with something similar with migration corridors.
Follow up? So with that, Director, with the LMO, there's no requirements for a permit. So is there any notification to the Wyoming Game and Fish or any other agency that they're proposing to utilize an LMO facility to explore?
Mr. Chairman, we have a system set up where we do communicate with the Game and Fish on activities that we're permitting, and they have the opportunity to review that and work with the operator to develop appropriate mitigation if it's necessary.
Very good. Thank you, Director. Any other questions for the Director or Administrator O'Brien? Seeing none, Administrator, let's go on to House Bill 15 and review that one.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And again, I'll just walk through page by page in the lines with the proposed changes. So with this bill, it's really just a pared down version of House Bill 10, focusing on the bonding updates. So if you go to page 3, lines 6 through 11, this grandfathers in LMOs, excluding quarries, that have commenced operations prior to July 1st, 2025, to the bond amount of $2,000 per acre, including access roads in the affected land acreage. If you go to page 3, lines 13 through 18, for LMOs excluding quarries that have commenced operations after that July 1st, 2025, it requires a bond amount of $5,000 per acre of affected lands. And again, this is to adjust for inflation, with the last update having been in 2014. On page 3, lines 20 through 21, this grandfathers in quarry LMOs that have commenced operations prior to July 1st, 2025, to the bond amount of $3,000 per acre. If you go to page 4, lines 4 through 8, for quarry LMOs that have commenced operations after July 1st, 2025, it requires a bond amount of $7,000 per acre of affected lands. If you go to page 4, lines 10 through 12, this allows LMOs to use either the per acre bonding rates or full cost bond, and the DEQ will accept whichever is lower. If you go to page 4, lines 14 through 15, this is extending that review period for the administrator to determine whether or not additional bond amount is needed, from 90 days to 150 days, to be consistent with existing LQD timelines. And then page 4, lines 19 through 20, this is increasing the time for operators to post any additional bond, giving them 45 days rather than 30 days to post that additional bond amount. If you go to page 5, lines 13 through 18, this is codifying the existing bond release practices for LMOs. And then if you go to page 6, lines 2 through 6, this is also codifying the existing bond release practices within the release of bonds section of the statute.
Thank you, Administrator. Any questions about House Bill 15 for the Administrator or Director of the DEQ? Seeing none, thank you very much. This was very, very thorough, and appreciate you being here for this. Members, those attending here, we will now hear from any elected officials that are in the room. Welcome, Representative Landon Brown. Do you have anything that you would like to share with this committee on these bills? All right, thank you very much. Any other elected officials? I do not see any. Any other departments of the state that would like to participate? Mr. Wentland. Thank you for being here. In your prior life, you were very involved in this.
Mr. Chairman, it is always a pleasure to be with this committee, and thank you for that. I would just
Would you
add,
state your name for the record?
yeah, Mr. Chairman, it's Kyle Wentland, and I am the Director of Fossil Fuels for the Wyoming Energy Authority. And I would just follow up with a few general, high-level comments here. I think in the discussions of this over the past couple of years, you have to keep in mind the word limited. These are 15-acre or less sites. You're talking about a disturbance that is one large house foundation or 3 small house foundations, to just give some perspective on that. The second thing is the bill itself doesn't change anything around the acquisition of a mineral right. You have to have a mineral right before you can approach the DEQ and even apply for a notification or a permit. You have to have a patented mineral right. And once you have that right and you bring that forward, then the DEQ is by statute obligated to act on that right. But this bill doesn't do anything with the mineral rights and the granting of those rights. It does remove the exemption on the small mine permits, and I would add on that what we had found over the years in the history of this is that the overburden and tonnage limitations, we were hitting a wall where the projects were getting a big enough scale that it just wasn't enough, and we were setting the operators up to fail against those restrictions because they just couldn't get enough mineral. And that's why the large permit was more advantageous for them. And then the bill promotes mineral diversification within the state. You're opening it up to prove up different mineral assets. You know, we've got interest in gold. We've got interest in lithium now. And, you know, those are things that would help diversify that mineral base and mineral tax base right now. And the last thing I would add is I think few understand the interconnection of these non-coal minerals with our energy industries in the state. You know, we need bentonite for drilling fluid to drill holes in the ground for oil and gas. We use trona for the extraction process in uranium. We use the aggregate resources for roads and pads for oil and gas and concrete. So getting these pits open and getting access to these minerals and that speed to market results in revenue to the state and diversification of the state, and it's important right now going forward, especially in the environment we're in, where I think you're going to see development and speed to market of several things moving forward. We saw the Stargate announcement last night, for example, on the data centers. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Wentland. Any questions? Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I happen to agree, you know, one of my concerns is that the 15 acres, and that's the reason why I'd ask if this was a prospecting venture, is my concerns is 15 acres is very, very small to where I'm not sure you can get a good representation of whatever you're chasing it after. What do you think would be a more better size that would allow for a proper sampling when using this as a tool? I guess would be the best way to say that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Wentland, please.
Mr. Chairman, that's a great question, and this was looked into in some detail because, as Administrator O'Brien alluded to, there are other exploration permits out there. So you're going to do that base exploration, and let's just say you have a drilling program and you're going to define down to where you have a particularly high-grade portion of that deposit. What this would allow then is to develop that higher grade area and say, do we actually have enough material here and in enough highest grade quantity to pursue an actual mine permit? If you do, you can go forward with the mine permit. If you don't, you can close up and do your reclamation and move on to a new site. So the 15 acres was actually a good fit when it's put in context of the whole program. And it's a logical progression from exploration to prove up in the 15 acres to full-blown mine permit.
Follow up?
That answers my questions. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Mr. Wentland, the 15 acres, does that include roads, access roads, or strictly the activities where the mining is going on?
Mr. Chairman, that was decided back in, I believe, 2012 or 14. I'm sorry, it was a little before my time with the DEQ, but the roads are excluded from that and have been excluded for the better part of a decade in the existing statute.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Riggins, I haven't been watching you. If you want to say something, you may have to poke me. Is there any questions from Representative Riggins that you would like to address?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm doing just fine.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Wentland. Any other agencies from the state that are here that would like to testify? Seeing none, any citizens that are here in the room that would like to provide public testimony? Welcome to our meeting. Appreciate you being here. Appreciate the citizens that take their time to be away from home, from their jobs, and come and testify for this committee. We appreciate that. Please state your name for the record.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Carolyn Griffith, chairperson of the Casper Mountain Preservation Alliance. Just for clarification, I'm not just representing Casper. Moreover, to represent situational awareness of what could occur anywhere in our state. Our concerns are related to the potential of unintended consequences of mining to residential areas with minimal oversight as is required in the current LMO exemptions. 15 acres is significant. I heard it mentioned, and I realize in some instances it's for exploration. In the case of sand and gravel, that's a sand and gravel mine. That's significant. I don't know about your home, but my home certainly isn't 15 acres big a foundation. In fact, where my home is and where about 100 other homes are, we're on sites that require a minimum of 10 acres for one dwelling because of the fragile water supply off of the mountain. And I'm sure it's like that in other areas of this state, maybe in those around you and those that you represent. So 15 acres is significant. The burden of proof, whether a particular area is suitable for mining, seems to be falling on the residents and the taxpayers. As an example, let's say there's 40 homes that surround an area where there's a proposed mine. Those 40 homes, as it stands with the LMO process, may be required to do some pre-testing of their water to make sure that there's proof that if that water source is impacted, that you could prove that, because that's not in the LMO requirement at this point. Again, it's merely a notification. We don't have any say. It's a matter of, we're going to put this here. My well might be 10 feet deep, but I can put a well in that's 80 feet deep, or I'm sorry, a mine in that's 80 feet deep and cover a 15-acre space. That doesn't make sense to me when I can't put a second home on my 11 acres, for an example. So think about that. I mean, if the 40 homes are expected to pay in excess of $500 for a water quantity or quality, that's just for the quality test, not even the quantity test. If it's not worthy enough for a potential miner to come in and pay for that testing because it's not required, then that's got to fall on the homeowners. So there's some kind of a baseline, because once that water is damaged and gone, it's too late. It's gone. And now what? And I don't even know the current bonding amounts if they wouldn't even begin to touch the replacement of that water supply. So that's the concern where we are. The CMPA, which is Casper Mountain Preservation Alliance, we recognize the need for gravel. We're not against gravel mining at all. We expect it to be done responsibly and administered responsibly. We stand opposed to the LMO exemptions as they are written, as well as expanding to non-coal minerals. because we just feel that the impact to the citizens without proper oversight is too risky. And I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Ms. Griffith. Any questions, Ms. Griffith? So are you familiar with House Bill 59 that is going to be heard a little bit later this morning?
Somewhat, yes, I've read it.
Okay, thank you. We'll deal with that a little bit later, and hopefully you'll be here to discuss your concerns.
Yes, thank you.
All right, thank you for being, oh, excuse me, Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Is it Ms. Griffiths?
Griffith,
Griffith.
just like Andy.
I understand Campbell just like soup.
Yeah, there you go.
My concern on this is because this is dealing with private property. I don't know that we, as a state, could influence we can't force private property owners to do anything against their will, basically, so to speak, I guess, to where, I'm not sure we're exactly apples to apples and oranges to oranges on this. I will refer back to House Bill 59, come back again. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Representative Campbell, but we can protect the surrounding landowners, that, you know, there is some rights there as well, so. Ms.
Chairman
Griffith.
Heiner.
Chair-
Chairman Heiner, Riggins is wanting to say
Okay,
something.
all right, thank you, Mark. Ms.
Uh,
Griffith.
Chairperson Heiner, Representative Campbell, just one clarification, if I might. Certainly LMOs are appropriate on private land. I mean, if somebody wants to mine their own land and so forth, they're gonna check with we would all assume they would check with their neighbors. This hasn't been an issue until it became an issue on state lands. And that's state lands.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Representative Riggins, just a second, Ms. Griffith, we have a question from Representative Riggins.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Ms. Griffith. I was wanting to know if she would have any suggestions, what she thinks would be an adequate boundary to receive such notifications. Being from Casper, I'm fairly familiar with what's emerged out of that situation here. But where else what would be an adequate boundary for some applicant to notify people, in her opinion?
Ms. Griffith.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Riggins, I'm going to yield a little bit to another one of our citizens that is going to speak, who's prepared to talk about that somewhat. But I do think that notification and the opportunity to have a voice in case there is a mine proposed in an area that may not be appropriate, that and now we're getting a little bit mixed up in the lease situation. And so I don't want to address that at all, but I think if there's at least an opportunity to have a voice so that people are aware, as just opposed to a notification that it's going to happen, and there you are. I don't know if that answered your question for the boundary.
Follow up, Representative Riggins?
No, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Ms. Griffith.
And
Thank
thank
you for
you.
being here. Any other citizens that would like to provide testimony? Thank you for being here. Appreciate you taking time out to be in front of the committee to provide some public testimony. Please state your name for the record.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Michael Fernald, and I reside in Casper. Good morning, Chairman and committee members. Thank you for your dedication in listening to the concerns of Wyoming citizens regarding the proposed amendments to LMOs. I appreciate your willingness to seek balanced solutions that benefit our economy and our communities. The Casper Mountain Preservation Alliance does not oppose mining. We believe in practices that balance industrial growth with stewardship. We also recognize mining's importance to our economy and understand the desire for streamlined operations that create jobs and generate tax revenues for our state. I want to address the proposed expansion of LMOs to include non-inert minerals in House Bill 0010, a move that strays from the original intent behind these exemptions. The 2-acre exemption, the incrementally expanded set of exemptions we now refer to as the LMO, was established in 1973. As former Speaker John Marton illustrated in 1998, the exemption was initially designed for small, low-impact projects such as ranchers and municipalities extracting limited amounts of gravel for local use. During the October 8, 2024 committee meeting, the former LQD administrator noted that operations on 15 acres could reach depths of 80 to 100 feet, depending on the material's competency. As demonstrated by the Teton Glamping Resort's groundwater pollution last fall, proper initial assessments are crucial. The pollution was only detected because testing was conducted before and after the project began. When a neighboring property is compromised, we risk long-term impacts on public health, ranching, property values, ultimately harming our communities, and undercutting the economic gains that we hope to see from mining. The CMPA does not support House Bill 0010 and instead does support 15. In closing, I urge this committee to first take up bonding measures only through House Bill 0015 and then work on merging House Bill 0010 and the small mining permit process next year with appropriate initial testing, public notification to accomplish what House Bill 0010 is set to achieve this year, making it easier for non-inert mineral operators to start exploration and mining operations, but with the appropriate safeguards for Wyoming citizens. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Fernald. Any questions, committee? Mr. Fernald, you talked a lot about groundwater monitoring and testing, and we have a bill that we'll talk about that a little bit later, but is that, if we had something to protect the groundwater or additional testing, is there any other concerns you have, or is that the only concern you have that we could alleviate today?
That's not the only concern. I think that the public notice component is a large component, particularly if the if a mining operator is using the LMO as basically a way to prove reserves and then with the intent to expand into a large mine operation. Once that initial LMO footprint is there, if there wasn't ever any public notice, there would be public notice on the large mine, but we've already started down that path. And without, appropriate testing prior to, being able to dig down 80 or 100 feet, I think that that's really the problem. I did mention the groundwater just because it's kind of an easy apple to pull off the tree, basically. But the appropriate testing and the ability to allow citizens to comment on something that potentially could grow beyond 15 acres, I think is important, which is why I suggested, looking at merging what House Bill 10 is trying to achieve this year with a small mine permit, and just focus on the bonding this year.
Thank you. So with the LMO, it's my understanding that the notification is for within 1 mile radius. Do you propose a different distance for notification than that, Mr. Renaud?
So as I understand it, a notification and public comment period are separate things. Is that a correct understanding? So if so, I think it's the public comment that I think should be allowed. So I think the 1 mile radius, in my opinion, is sufficient for notification, but then having that public comment period for projects that are more or less destined to grow into large mine permits is where the rub is, basically.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you for your
You're welcome.
testimony.
Thank you.
Any other citizens in the room that would like to provide testimony? Please state your name for the record.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Alec Underwood, and I'm the program director for the Wyoming Outdoor Council. We've weighed in on this bill before.
So we're having citizen comments right now.
Oh, sorry, I didn't realize you were going to
Yeah.
call for organizational comments.
So just hang on. Any other citizens in the room that do not represent organizations? We have one here, so hang on a little bit. I'll take that after the citizens, yes. All right, seeing no more citizens, Mr. Underwood, would you come forward, please?
My apologies, Mr. Chairman. Again, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Alec Underwood with the Wyoming Outdoor Council. I'd like to start by thanking Mr. Detai and the Mining Association. Compared to the original bill that I believe was Senate File 44, it's come a long way with the updated bonding and some reclamation requirements. And while we support updated bonding levels for reclamation and are not opposed to limited mining operations as they currently stand, we stand opposed to HB 10 because of the inclusion of these new mineral types. We believe that exempting all non-coal minerals under this category will undoubtedly create more conflicts. As you heard from previous testimony, there are existing issues with LMOs, including a lack of specificity and proper oversight. Landowners, adjacent communities don't really have the ability to understand what the impacts will be. As you've heard, it's just a notice for the limited mining operation category. We firmly believe that exempting a variety of these new minerals will theoretically increase the amount of LMO applications around the state. So you'll see more instances where neighboring adjacent landowners will want to know what's going on. Within the small mine category alone, we've heard from people in Bondurant with that recent gravel mine, which was in the small mine category, that were concerned about impacts, and they had trouble getting information. In summary, we stand opposed based on the public comment period that essentially removing the small mine category is effectively removing public comment on those mineral types as you move them into the LMO category. So stand opposed to the bill and certainly appreciate the efforts by the Mining Association to update bonding levels. Happy to answer questions from the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Underwood. Any questions for Mr. Underwood? Representative Larson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and Mr. Underwood, thanks for being here. Just curious if we were to consider some sort of ability for landowners, surrounding landowners to provide public comment or even raise a flag and say they didn't want it, what threshold would you like to see as far as it being able to be shut down? I mean, do you think one landowner should be able to shut it down, or do you think it has to be, 80%? What are your thoughts there?
Mr. Underwood.
Mr. Chairman, Representative Larson, we don't necessarily feel as though it should be shut down by one landowner or multiple. I think it's more about the opportunity for the public to understand what impacts there will be. With these hard rock minerals, often they are more hazardous or have the potential for having water quality impacts. Multiple sections of Wyoming statute recognize that these types of minerals need more oversight from Department of Environmental Quality. So we see it more as an issue of understanding what the impacts are. I do realize we have another bill in this committee today on water quality testing and look forward to hearing about that. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
Follow up, Mr. Representative Larson. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Underwood.
Thank you.
Any other agencies, business entities that would like to provide testimony? Welcome.
Thank you. Mr. Chair and members of the committee.
Would you turn the mic on, please?
Okay, how's that?
Good.
Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Joe Evers. I'm the president of Wyoming Rare USA, a subsidiary of American Rare Earths, and we're working on a rare earth element development kind of on the county line, Platte and Albany, in between Laramie and Wheatland. I thought I would speak today on the perspective of business interests that would avail ourselves to this type of opportunity with the limited mine operation if expanded to other minerals like rare earth elements. Currently, we hold a license to explore, which was alluded to earlier, and allows the ability under similar disturbance requirements. Ours is about 5.5 acres for context, and it allows you to take material and do some testing on that material. There's a little bit of a time frame on that, but I think the limited mine operation in our context provides a very useful interim step between the full permit to mine and the license to explore. For a little bit of context on what we're trying to work on, rare earth elements are all tongue twisters, but they're important industrial inputs in our economy in industries like national defense, energy, et cetera. Currently, there's only one rare earth element mine in the United States, and China controls about 95% of the market. So that evolution between a limited or license to explore into the limited mining operation, and all while permitting on the broader context, gives a company like ours the ability to generate material that's integral to the testing to show the marketplace that our minerals are usable in their industrial inputs. So we support the limited mine operation in our context. It would be helpful in our business operations as we grow in the state of Wyoming, and appreciate your consideration of same. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Evers. Any questions for Mr. Evers? Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Evers. Do you feel that 15 acres, because it's with the rare earth elements in mind that I was kind of thinking, do you believe that that's probably a pretty realistic number or acreage?
For
Mr. Evers, please.
Thank you, Chairman and Representative Campbell. For our specific geology, that's sufficient. Our mineralization is homogeneous, so we're not chasing a vein of any kind. So that gives us a very good opportunity to explore and then potentially market those materials, which is excluded under the license to explore. There's no marketing of your material available under that scenario. Limited mine operation allows the potential sale of the minerals.
Any follow-up? Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just want to make sure I'm looking at this right. This is just another tool in the prospecting process, is the way that I'm envisioning this, to where we can go ahead and use this and then move on to a mining permit from that. But this would allow the speed, because that's what I'm looking at. You know, technology changes every day. And I give kudos to you guys, because you guys have brought Wyoming into the cutting edge of technology, and we have the ability to stand up to China because of your guys' efforts and others in your industry. But you do think this is a good effort in your mind going forward?
Mr. Evers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative Campbell. I do think this is a good effort. I like the way that you've talked about it as a tool in the toolbox. To give the committee a little more context, we're kind of different in the commodity space, where our end product we sell in kilograms, not tons or pounds or barrels. So in our processing, we will look to leave upwards of 90% of the geologic material at the mine site and only process a very small portion of that. So these front-end tools in the toolbox really help us obtain material to refine the mineral processing elements of the project, and also help us to kind of penetrate the market and show people, this is the material that we'll have, will it work for your process, and help us find the customers that are necessary to bring things online.
Thank you, Mr. Evers. Vice Chair Tarver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a bill like this, without this bill, what kind of hardships are you facing to develop your mine currently?
Mr. Evers.
Thank you, Chairman and Representative Tarver. I think being in the mining business, we have to be optimists, so I wouldn't classify anything as a hardship. But the thing that I think is interesting from the limited mining operation perspective, if you look at it, like I said, of the evolution, we have our license to explore. So that's about a 5.5 acre footprint that I stated. With that, you'll have the requisite equipment and operational materials that you need to bear that out. The limited mining operation would allow us to continue to use those resources as we permit the full mine. And so in our situation might be different than other operators that you would speak to, but we are underway on the full permit to mine, and we've collected the baseline data that would be requisite. In most cases, well, we've collected most of that data, and we're working up to what you would need to file. So I think to answer your question, the limited mining operation gives you an opportunity to continue to use, in our case, the materials and equipment that we would put out under the license to explore for longer than the time periods associated with that license.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Evers? Mr. Evers, understanding that as you try to explore and develop more of a knowledge of what there is before you go for the full permit, you can use the LMO in up to 15 acres. But this legislation says that you can only use one LMO, and then you have to go further than 6 miles away for another LMO site, 15 acres. So if you're trying to define the area of a potential mine, is that going to be a problem where you can just do 15 acres and then you can't do another LMO for 6 miles?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For us, that's not an issue that we contemplate. The exploration that helps us delineate our resource is done through drilling and taking core samples or chip samples, which is another area of DEQ oversight that we work with. That allows us to kind of determine what the expanse of the mineralization is, and then from there, we work with third parties to assay that, and we can help understand where the resource looks. The limited mining operation for us allows us to increase the material that we can test and market in a way that the drilling doesn't cost effectively allow you to do. So right now, our sample materials are obtained from the drilling samples, which is a very expensive undertaking. And the limited mining operation would help us understand how we can use the mineralization more in a traditional mining sense rather than taking core samples across our property. Speaking to the size, we seek, the license to explore covers a portion of state land, state-owned surface, state-owned minerals. My understanding of the license to explore and the limited mining operation as it's contemplated, we work with our neighboring landowner who also has the grazing lease associated with the state land, and we have to obtain their concurrence before we take that to the DEQ. That's my understanding. So the contemplated future mine is on the same parcel of land that the limited mining operation would potentially target.
Thank you, Mr. Evers. Seeing no further questions, thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Any other individuals representing businesses? We have no more seats at the time, so thank you for filling them up.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Kelly Little, and I represent the Associated General Contractors of Wyoming. I have with me today Colby Willett, who is with Knife River, and he has some remarks that he would like to give related to House Bill 10.
Mr. Roulette, is it?
Willett.
Willett, okay. Please proceed, Mr. Willett.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. As said before, my name is Colby Willett with Knife River, and I'm representing the Associated General Contractors of Wyoming today. AGC of Wyoming is appreciative to the committee's commitment to reduce the burden and over-regulation and find ways for businesses to be more streamlined and efficient. AGC of Wyoming supports this bill, and we ask for your favorable vote. AGC of Wyoming is comfortable with the increases in the bonding rates specified in the bill. We feel it is a fair amount of increase that will hold the state harmless and be settled policy for the foreseeable future. We appreciate the grandfather clause that keeps the operating mines at the current rates. We are supportive of the change in the mine classification system and the removal of the small mine classification. This again just reduces the complicated policy and streamlines the statutes. We support the reduction in the reclamation period from 5 years to 2 years. We feel this is adequate for the size and the scope of LMOs. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I will stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Willett. Any questions for AGC? Mr. Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Wilmot. I would be remiss to have you come here to go away without asking, do you have any reserves with this?
Reservations?
Any reservations? Yeah, anything, do you see any pitfalls? Do you see anything to where there could be problems going forward?
Mr. Willett?
From my site, no, I don't see anything right out. Oh, sorry, Mr. Chairman and Representative Campbell. I don't see any big pitfalls for the type of work we do.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, may I
Yes.
answer that as well? Just,
Yes, Ms. Little.
I would like to give a little context that this bill has been a product of several years of conversation with the committee, with the department, with the industries that are impacted. We've worked out the appropriate bonding amounts, coming to consensus on that, and kind of worked the different aspects of the bill to where everybody feels pretty comfortable with the changes that are being made.
Thank you, Ms. Little. And seeing no questions, Mr. Detai, you're up.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Travis Detai with the Mining Association. In full support of the bill, as my colleague, Ms. Little, noted, we've been working on this for a long time. And, just a little bit of the history, there was a time when the Minerals Committee worked this over the interim, prior to the last interim, and the committee voted on it unanimously. It was a relatively non-controversial bill, got kind of derailed by some outside issues. The body did pass this last year, heavily amended, and the amendments were a little too much for the governor, probably rightly so, and he vetoed this bill. So I think this bill that you worked in the interim has brought it back to where it needs to be. When we're talking about what we need to do in this state to create jobs, to generate revenue, this bill fits it. This bill fits the bill. It streamlines the process. It reduces regulation. We took this bill and Mr. Wentland in his previous role brought it before the Regulatory Reduction Task Force when we went through that whole exercise about how we can cut regulations and streamline things and do things more efficiently. And it came through that. So we think this is a good, and again, our interest from the Mining Association is for the non-coal minerals to be able to take advantage of that, as you heard Mr. Evers say. We believe that this is, and I think what's important here when we're talking about public comment, what the intent is, and I think for a non-coal mineral, whether it be bentonite or rare earths or gold, is to use the LMO to get started, to do their prove up, to be able to put some product out on the market, to start generating 11 while they're working on their general mine permit. And that general mine permit is going to have the full public comment period. These minerals have to be fully bonded. I think it's kind of getting a little lost here, is that they're just going to be doing the 15 acres and then that's it. It's doing the 15 acres in the whole context of the larger mining permit and doing it at the same time. So, and I think that's where our interest comes into it. And the public is not left out, because with your general mining permit, which takes about a year to get, the DEQ goes through all their processes with air, with water, and with the public comment period. So it's not like you're gonna have an operation come in and just do 15 acres, under the lower regulation or the lower oversight of an LMO. And an LMO, and we're losing sight. The LMO, the DEQ does do oversight of an LMO. They do oversight of an LMO. So we're fully supportive of this. And Mr. Chairman, you know, you asked me a question when we were discussing severance tax the other day when reductions, and, you know, come to the table with an idea of how to kind of backfill. We're talking a lot about backfill when you're looking at how to provide tax relief to the people of this state. The solution to that, to backfilling, is let's do more mining. Let's start developing these new resources. Let's bring these new sectors online that we haven't, we haven't done hard rock mining in this state for generations, and we're gonna bring it back. Let's make it easier to bring it back online so that we can generate the revenue for the state, so that we can create the jobs. And there's the solution to your backfill problems, Mr. Chairman. And with that, I would appreciate the committee's support on this. We've talked this thing to death over the last 2.5 years. It's time to pass this bill and get moving and start turning some earth in this state.
Thank you, Mr. Detail. Any questions for Mr. Detail? I have a couple here, starting with Vice Chair. Mr. Tarver.
Mr. Detail, have you had a chance to look at 59 that we're going to be looking at here shortly? And how do you feel about that bill going with this bill?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I have had a chance to look at it, and I think from our perspective, we are going to oppose that because I think one of the goals of this bill is to streamline, to reduce regulation, and that would just add more burden and more time to an operation. So we would probably oppose that, and we can have that debate when the bill comes up.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Tarver. You asked my question. I was going to ask, is the language of this holistic with other statutes? So we'll address that moving forward. Thank you for your time, sir.
Any other questions for Mr. Detail? Representative Schmidt, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Okay, Mr. Detail, you clarified it for me where the public fits in on this now, so I've got that. My question is say for instance, we have some small mines that don't get any larger than the 15 acres, you know, they're out for a special project somewhere. How does the public comment fit into a situation like that?
Mr. Detail.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I would say for our sectors, for the rare earths, for the gold, for bentonite, you're going to be outside of the 15 acres. You're going to have the public comment. I don't think any of my particular sectors would be, stuck at, we're gonna do 15 acres and that's it.
Okay.
Follow up, Representative?
Yes, and you may not be able to answer that question, but is there somebody in the room that could answer that on a operation at 15 acres or less?
You know, Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Detail.
on questions like this that I can't, when we're talking about the LMO process, I always default back to my friend, Mr. Wentland, and he could probably answer that.
All right.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions for Mr. Detail, Mr. McKay, please.
Mr. Chairman, Rennie McKay, President of the Wyoming Business Alliance. Glad to be with you all today and great to see Representative Riggins online. Hope you're doing well. Just want to say Business Alliance represents all industries, all businesses, all sizes. And just to talk a little bit about how we're seeing the future right now is this is an exciting moment for Wyoming businesses. I think there's a great opportunity for some growth. Job creators are doing an excellent job right now. We have a lot of jobs in Wyoming. And this is a moment in time when we look at what's going on with the federal government. There's real opportunity for permitting reform that I think could really help all industries as we move forward. And this, I think, is another opportunity in Wyoming because there are some great things happening. First of all, I think the current LMO law is important. When we talk about our contractors, is this law and that access to what you get from a gravel pit is so important to the cost of our highways, the cost of other construction. So right now, there's a good policy on the book that really does help bring down costs. And I think you've all created a good policy paradigm for that. And now as we look to the future and the expansion, this is an incredible moment. The globe is looking at what's happening in Wyoming and our critical minerals and the opportunity for rare earth element development here. And that is really amazing that we've got an opportunity to have, again, I think Wyoming has done so well to provide this nation and a lot of the world with energy going forward. But now there's another product, and it's in some great spots. So we're going to see some things like Platte County and Albany County benefit, we all hope, from an operation like this. And so, as you look at this, I think that this is a great tool. As I consider it, and the details, it's a responsible change too in terms of streamlining. So I think this is good permitting reform at the state level, because you've got this is not going to be the toehold for a company to break ground without public comment. Exploration happens already with that notification process. So you're not making any huge changes on that front either, but you're allowing a company to get more information and also get more information from the marketplace more quickly at a really small scale before you start the larger conversation. So I think this is a great opportunity. And again, just we're always looking at trying to find that sweet spot on permitting reform and streamlining. Representative Schmid, you asked about wildlife. You and I both wore different hats at different times. We know that operators who are trying to deal with gravel pits would have to go to the Game and Fish Department and give the heads up. And so you wouldn't get that development in Sage Grouse Core for a gravel pit or any operation without that approval from Game and Fish. That process would be part of this. So again, I think you've got some great safeguards in place. This isn't some new enormous change about how you're starting a process, but you're just helping get, I think, better information for the marketplace and for companies to go. And this is exciting to me. So thanks for considering it.
Thank you, Mr.
The
McKay.
Business Alliance supports it.
Thank you, Mr. McKay. Any questions for Rennie McKay? Thank you. Appreciate your
Thank you,
comments.
Mr. Chairman.
and Testimony. Before we bring up, recall Mr. Wentland, is there any other individuals that represent businesses? Mr. Lindholm. Welcome to the committee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Tyler Lindholm. I'm the State Director for Americans for Prosperity here in the state of Wyoming. We stand on in favor of House Bill 15. Not necessarily a big fan of House Bill, or not necessarily a big fan of your other piece of legislation that just looks at the bonding requirements. We think this is an important step. We've worked on LMOs quite a bit over the last probably a little over a decade, as far as trying to find a way to expand capability while protecting that environmental stewardship that Wyoming has done a fantastic job with in our mining sector over decades. We've been able to ensure that those bonding requirements have met those needs in our communities, while at the same time respecting private property rights or the property rights of whoever may hold them. That's an important distinction because as we've seen from the federal government, they're not necessarily super great about bonding requirements here recently for our oil and gas friends. And I certainly suspect that if the current administration had moved on, thankfully they didn't, they would have certainly looked at mining. And that's a big concern. So we're in favor of expanding the scope of LMOs while at the same time expanding the capabilities of those bonding requirements.
Mr. Lindholm, just to be clear, you said you're in support of House Bill 15, but that's the one that just expands the bonding. So let me be clear here. You're in favor, you support House Bill 10 and not so much House Bill 15.
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. I'm certain that Mr. Detail probably flinched when I misspoke right there.
All right, thank you very much. Any questions for Mr. Lindholm? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
For being here. Any other individuals representing, please?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Richard Garrett, and I'm here today representing the Greater Yellowstone Coalition. Our mission is to protect the land and water and wildlife that we all depend on, and not just this generation, but future generations as well. I'll do my best not to make Mr. Detai flinch, but I probably can't help but do that. I'm going to confine my remarks to one subject only, and that is notification. In the greater Yellowstone ecosystem, we'll find underneath the surface something called the Madison Aquifer, which is a groundwater system that spans a good portion of this state, all the way up towards the northeast corner of our state, where you as legislators and your predecessors have invested quite a bit of money in order to bring water from that groundwater aquifer, the Madison, to the city of Gillette. So in terms of notification, is a mile enough? When at risk could be an entire aquifer that serves a completely different part of the state, and frankly, outside what we regard as the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. So I would only urge the committee to be cautious. I know the department is about how we treat our groundwater in this state. It's something that 70% of the people in our state depend on for their drinking water supply. We've got a tremendous track record in the state of protecting groundwater in the oil and gas industry. A few years ago, at the urging of the legislature and our governor at that time, industry encouraged the adoption of baseline testing of groundwater near development of oil and gas resources, something that we supported and so many people in our state have benefited from. So I'd only be cautious about that notification requirement, Mr. Chairman, and I'll confine the rest of my remarks this morning to your subsequent bill on HB 59.
Thank you very much, Mr. Garrett.
Thank you.
Any questions for Mr. Garrett? Thank you. Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Garrett. I just wanted to ask, with this being restricted to 15 acres, and they have to keep all their tailings and everything on site, everything, do you realistically think that groundwater is going to be a problem on such a small scale operation as that?
Mr. Garrett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Representative Campbell, I am not a hydrologist, and hydrology is a very complicated subject, as you well know. As a layperson, I'd say probably not. Processing is not permitted on this 15-acre disturbance, is my understanding of the bill as it's drafted. I'd urge you to resist, and I am not aware of any attempt to change that restriction, but there was reference made to processing by a prior commenter. So as long as that stays in place, there's probably a de minimis challenge to groundwater. But I do want to keep the committee's attention focused on a resource that is not necessarily visible to all of us, but upon which so many of us depend.
Thank you, Mr. Garrett.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your testimony. Any other comments? We'll return to Mr. Wentworth. We're getting short on time, so if Representative Campbell, if you will address your question to Mr. Wentworth that you asked to be recalled.
My question has been answered. I don't think, I just want to make sure that everybody is comfortable looking at this as a tool for exploration that provides minimum, because that's the way I'm looking at this, is minimum invasivity to where we can realistically go forth in exploration of these other than coal minerals. But I don't want any, I want to make sure that any concerns are brought forth, because I think this is a very realistic endeavor. So I just want to make sure I'm looking at it at both sides, but I see this as a really, really good tool to do what we're trying to do.
Is there a question there?
Yeah, is 15 acres in storing all your tailings and everything on site, that really restricts what you can do to where this is, as I said, a minimum invasive exploration tool. Am I incorrect, sir?
Mr. Wentworth.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Kyle Wentland, Director of Fossil Fuels for the Energy Authority. And the answer to that question is yes, you're spot on with that. I think the broader answer to your initial question too is if they're in that prove-up phase in that 15-acre development and the reserve just isn't there, they're gonna reclaim it, walk away, and go somewhere else. So this is a way to define those areas that are actually viable.
Thank you, Mr. Wentland. Vice Chair has a question.
Ms. Whitland, we've got some concerns about public notice. Would you walk us through the process on state land, how it works when you're leasing it, and is there any opportunity there for public notice to what the intentions of the lease, or would you kind of fill in that gap for us, please?
Mr. Wentland.
Mr. Chairman, I'll try to do my best, but I really do not want to speak for state lands on this issue. But what I will say is that I'll go back to my prior testimony and say that the DEQ cannot act until they have a mineral right, a valid mineral right. So on any of these developments, nothing can happen until that mineral right is in place. And you have private mineral, you have state mineral, you have federal mineral, you have permutations of that where you have state surface private mineral, state surface federal mineral, blah, blah, blah. You know, like I said, there's about 30 permutations when you get down to that on what those approvals have to be in place. And, you know, again, DEQ cannot move forward with any of these until they have that mineral right.
Thank you, Mr. Wentland. Okay, without any further
Chairman.
comments,
Chairman.
we will
Mr.
go to
Riggins.
Zoom. We have a number of people.
Mr. Riggins was
Oh,
wanting to.
Mr. Representative Riggins, you had a question. I'm sorry, I missed that.
That's right, Mr. Chairman. I heard the answer.
All right,
Thank
thank
you.
you. All right, we will go to our remote participation. We have a number of people online. So because of time, we're going to restrict the comments to no more than 4 minutes. So Mark, who do you have?
We'll start with Dale, please.
Mr. Brown. And we will cut it off at 4 minutes. So we would like to hear your testimony, but it needs to be on things that we have not heard so far, and we don't want to reiterate the same thing. So Mr. Brown, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Dale Brown with WWC Engineering. I'm a consultant that works with industry to do their permitting. And a lot of the stuff that we do, we see that this bill would simplify things in the process and also help with the permitting process and help things move through the process quicker. In the permitting process for a LMO, please don't lose the fact that that's not the only permit that they would have to obtain. They're also going to have to get their air quality permits. They're also going to have to go through planning and zoning for the local communities to make sure that fits their types of things. And then the other thing with this bill, with a small mine, like Mr. Evers, Mr. Wentland, and Mr. Detaille said, this bill will allow the sale of the mineral while they're going through the mine process. Just in the baseline collection, it takes about a year to do some of the baseline collections, and the cost for that, as long as you can sell the product, you're also helping pay for that process as you're going forward. With that, I stand for questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Just so to be clear, are you supporting or opposing?
I support this bill.
All right, thank
House
you.
Bill 10.
Any questions for Mr. Brown? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Mark?
Thank you very much, Chairman.
Maria would be next.
Ms. Catherman? Again, 4 minutes is the time that we have allotted. Do you hear us, Ms. Catherman? There you are. You must be muted.
Hi.
There we go.
Yes, I think I've solved that problem.
Yes.
I would like to put my support behind the LMO as it is just regarding the bonding. So that puts me for the HB 15. I think HB 10 is trying to do too much that the LMO was never designed to do. The LMO is really about a small mining operation, so someone can get some gravel, inert materials. The other materials that are now included are not inert, and I am afraid that the even 15 acres without any protections on water present a true threat because of the demand will have those risks I can be and some caution is because of that. So I would argue that the House Bill 15 addresses the bonding issue, which is all good for me, but I think the House Bill 10 goes well beyond that and needs some careful look and input from the public before to go ahead with that.
Thank you, Ms. Catherman.
And I take in Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. I see no questions. Thank you for your testimony. Mark, the next one is Kurt Imhoff.
He's offline now.
Okay, go on to the next one.
Verba Eccles would be next.
All right. Ms. Eccles.
She declined.
Okay. No others then, Mark, for remote? All right. All right, we will close public testimony at this point. Committee, what is your pleasure with House Bill 10 and House Bill 15? Representative Larson.
I'd like to move House Bill 10.
House Bill 10. Moved by Representative Larson, seconded by Representative Campbell. House Bill 10. Any discussion on House Bill 10? Representative Larson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Is this an appropriate time to offer an amendment?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, on page 3, there was a recommended amendment to add limestone to the list. So page 3, I would like to move an amendment to add limestone between scoria and dolomite on page 3, line 18.
Do I have a second? Second by Representative Knapp. Do you have that, Mark?
Yes.
Page 3, line 18.
Between
After
scoria and
before
dolomite, limestone?
Limestone, yes.
Thank you.
Any discussion on this amendment? I sense the question coming forward. Question being called. All those in favor of Representative Larson's proposed amendment signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Thank you. Any further discussion on House Bill 10? I think we went through it pretty much in detail, thanks to Administrator O'Brien. Any discussion? Question being called. Mark, this will be a roll call vote.
Representative Campbell.
Aye.
Representative Knapp.
Aye.
Representative Larson.
Aye.
Lawley. I have Representative Lawley's vote. Representative Riggins.
Aye.
Representative Schmidt.
Aye.
Representative Tarver.
Aye.
Representative Weber.
Aye.
Chairman Heiner.
Aye.
The vote is 8-1. This would pass with amendment.
All right, thank you very much. Any motion on House Bill 15? For lack of a motion, that bill will be tabled. Thank you very much, committee. If any of the committee members would like to carry this on the floor, Representative Larson, thank you for volunteering. All right, we will go on to House Bill 59, if Representative Harshman is still in the room. Okay. Representative Harshman, thank you for being here. Thank you for attending our little community here in the Minerals Committee.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman.
Is your mic on?
It is.
Okay, thank you. Just snug it up a little bit closer,
Okay.
like a rock star.
Okay.
Please introduce yourself and then proceed.
Okay, good morning, members and Mr. Chairman, and thanks for hearing the bill. Steve Harshman, House District 37, Trona County, Southwest Casper. Thanks for hearing the bill. I think the bill is brought to you. You've done a lot of work, and there's a couple of you that were on this committee in the interim. A lot of work on LMOs. As you know, LMOs started, I think, in the early 70s. Pretty limited amounts, those things. I think we've seen this commercialization of LMOs. You're dealing with that in the previous bills. You know, we'll debate that on the floor. I think the small mining is probably a better way to go, but we'll talk about that on the floor. But this bill, since we've seen the growth of LMOs, really is just an outgrowth for the people in Casper. Two failings of what happened. One was notification. I've got a little bill still in the speaker's drawer. I think state lands is good with that. We can amend that to, most of these LMOs don't need notification. But when people come out on a morning and see a backhoe digging on a state section that says no motor vehicles, and they're wondering what's going on. And that's the first thing, that notification that people got. And then, you know, the geology of Casper Mountain, that muddy mountain behind it, eventually was over the top of that, and it all collapsed millions of years ago. There's shale under there, so these wells are like 30, 40, 50 feet. I've got one that's 30 feet deep. Okay, so, and then, and hundreds of wells. And you look on the map, you can see all these wells. And so then, no notification at all. So people had no way to even know it was happening until it started happening. And then, what about their water? I mean, it's in a really spot that, and LMOs require no groundwater testing, just stormwater runoff, which is fine. That's the way it should be for LMOs. That's what, you know, when they were originally designed and brought by the legislature of some guys who were out on this wall somewhere in the early 70s, it was for pretty rural ranchers, guys, whatever. It wasn't meant to be a commercialization right next to a community who has hundreds of water wells down from this. So how do you fix this? I don't know. Notification is one. People ought to know. And really that other bill just, you know, and I think you could amend it, you know, an LMO within, on state lands within 3 miles of a municipality or whatever.
Representative, let's stick
I hear
on
you.
this bill.
And so, but and we can fix it. Thanks, Mr. Chairman, for that gentle nudge. And, but I think this other part, if we're gonna go down this road of commercializing LMOs, there are some spots where we should have groundwater testing. I mean, the bit that I've learned since last spring when I got the phone call on a Friday driving home in the session, hey, this is what's happening. And so I think notification and water testing. So, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, the bill is really simple, just adds a paragraph on page 3. It doesn't require it, but the DEQ can require it if they say, hey, this is kind of a unique area. maybe we ought to pause a little bit and do some groundwater testing. I would think 99% of the LMO applications aren't gonna need it. But when the one happens, we wanna make sure that, people are protected and they don't have to come to meetings in Cheyenne, drive down the roads, or throw $20 in a hat to hire a lawyer. It's not right. So anyway, so that's why the bill's before you. I don't know if it's the fix, but I think it's gotta be part of this discussion as we move forward. So, Mr. Chairman, stand for any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you for being here. And any comments or, well, any questions? Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative Harshman. Do you have any ideas on what kind of metric could be used to determine, because as you mentioned in this amendment, the department may, what could be a possible, do you have any ideas as to what could be a metric to be used in there?
Representative Harshman, please.
Mr. Chairman, through you, Mr. Chairman, absolutely not. We have experts at the Wyoming DEQ who have forgot more than I'll ever know about this. So that'd be up to the experts, yeah. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other questions for Representative Harshman? Seeing none, thank you very much. Any other agencies of the state or elected officials that would like
Chairman
to?
Heiner?
Yes.
Oh, Representative Riggins?
Representative Harshman, I'm sorry, I let you go too soon. I've got this very important representative on the wall here, and I keep forgetting to look. Representative Riggins, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Representative Harshman. Representative Harshman, do you know if that with any one of these LMOs that they all provide a geotech report, which would at least expose water levels and things like that? I wonder if that's a common practice.
Representative Harshman.
Mr. Chairman, I don't know the answer to that question. I think DEQ or others would know. So thank you.
All right, thank you, Representative. Okay. Mr. Director Parfit, you're bringing a friend.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Todd Parfit, Director of the Department of Environmental Quality, and I think somebody mentioned water quality expert, and to my right is the water quality expert, and I'm going to quickly pivot to her. Jennifer Zigmund, the Administrator for the Water Quality Division.
Ms. Zigmund, Administrator Zigmund,
Thank you.
please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, Jennifer Zigmund, Water Quality Administrator, Wyoming DEQ. And yeah, Mr. Chairman, prepared to provide some comments on this bill. First, I'll just ask, would you like me to do a more detailed walkthrough through the bill or just go into our comments?
Just go into your comments.
Great.
Administrator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So again, as Representative Harshman indicated, the bill would amend or create statutes to specify that the DEQ may conduct water quality testing before an LMO commences, and would also require that the Water Quality Division, in addition to the Land Quality Division, be notified before LMO operations commence. We certainly understand the concerns about potential impacts to drinking water that could occur with some LMOs. If the bill is passed, Water Quality would work with the Land Quality Division to carry out these new requirements. We do have established programs and that conduct this kind of activities as contemplated by the bill. So we have the experience and the expertise to provide this kind of oversight. We certainly support the concept of getting baseline water quality data. As has been alluded to previously, it's very important to have that baseline to first understand if there are changes over time within a watershed. And secondly, it helps us understand what that starting water quality is. In some areas of Wyoming, natural water quality may not meet standards that we have for Class 1 groundwaters that are protected for domestic use. So again, it's just important to know what the natural water quality is so that we can then understand if there are changes over time. So we do support that concept. I will briefly note that the bill just contemplates getting that baseline water quality data. It does not contemplate that the Water Quality Division or Land Quality would then get data over time. But if another entity chose to do that, again, that baseline is critical in understanding if changes have occurred. Again, we have the expertise and the experience to do this kind of work. However, if what is being contemplated is a statewide program, where water quality staff would need to look at each LMO across the state, make a decision if water quality, domestic water quality could be impacted, we do think we would need additional staff resources to carry out that new program. One question we have in order to help clarify fiscal impacts would be whether the bill is contemplating water quality doing the monitoring, or if we would require the operator of the LMO to do that monitoring before they could commence operations. There's pros and cons to each approach, but that would be something to help us understand how this program would be structured and what resources we would need. For purposes of the fiscal note that we provided, we did assume that the operator would be doing that monitoring and DEQ would be providing oversight and as needed, some additional monitoring for verification. If that's not the case again, we would have to take another look at that fiscal note. How we see this working is that we would anticipate establishing a rule to better outline what that decision-making would look like when we see an LMO, whether or not we would require testing. And that rule would also establish more specifications about the monitoring, how many sites, what parameters would need to be monitored, what quality assurance we would expect, et cetera. We can complete that rulemaking with existing staff, but we do anticipate that we would need another FTE at the ENNR 09, a natural resource analyst position, to then take that rule and then conduct the duties of what's contemplated by the bill, looking at each LMO, and we anticipate 15 to 20 per year across the state, evaluating impacts to domestic water, evaluating water quality impacts to domestic water supplies. And again, we're primarily talking about private wells, and then determining what monitoring needs to be conducted and providing oversight, communication, and outreach for that monitoring. Just a couple other things to note as we talk about what this monitoring would look like. If there were changes in water quality seen over time, again, the bill does not contemplate that. The bill only contemplates the baseline monitoring, but if somebody did additional monitoring over time and saw changes in their well, we would need to do further investigation to better determine if the LMO caused those changes or if other factors within a watershed caused those changes. Particularly for shallow wells, there's many factors within a watershed that can cause changes. But again, having that baseline data is critical to knowing whether or not there have been changes and what those changes could be caused by. It's also important to note that for this to work, landowners with drinking water wells would need to provide access either to the DEQ or the operator to provide a sample. If a landowner did not provide access, we would not be able to take a sample. We are assuming that that is what's envisioned by the bill, that we would sample existing wells. If the bill contemplates that new wells would have to be drilled in order to test water quality, that would have additional fiscal impact to either the DEQ or the operators. So, Mr. Chairman, I will stop there and stand for any questions, and happy to provide any other comments.
Thank you. Any questions for Administrator Zigmond? Representative Campbell, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ms. Zigmund. What would you recommend as a metric? Because that is concerning to me with that may and shall. And I totally understand what you're saying about the baseline, but what could we look at as a qualifier? I love the baseline straight across, but what would be something that would be an eye grab that, hey, we need to do a little extra digging on this situation?
Administrator Zigmund.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question. In terms of thinking about metrics, the primary metric that I would point to would be depth to groundwater. If we had an LMO where there's shallow groundwater, that is where we'd be more likely to see concerns. So there's other factors that we could consider, but primarily if there's shallow groundwater, I think that's where we'd be most concerned about impacts to surrounding wells.
Thank you. Any other questions? Representative Larson, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So you talked about rulemaking and you'll be required to do that. I noticed the effective date is immediate. Do you see a challenge with that? Do you need a split effective date for rulemaking versus the statute and, you know, make the rulemaking part immediate and then the rest of the statute July 1st? What are your thoughts?
Administrator Zygmunt.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for the question and the comment. I do think if this bill were effective immediately, we would undertake rulemaking right away, but we would need time to get that rule in place and then start implementing activities per that rule.
Any other questions? Representative Riggins, I see you on the wall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to know if they did do a baseline study in an area, let's just take the Casper condition. And what if you found that the quality of the water was lacking in some way? Just what would be the result to the surrounding community when they learned of that? What would happen? Just curious.
Administrator Zygmunt, I assume this is before operations commence.
Mr.
Right.
Chairman, Representative Riggins, thank you for the question. It's a very good question. And as I mentioned, there are many places in Wyoming where natural water quality may exceed some of the groundwater protection standards that we have just due to natural geology and the natural mineralogy. So it's not uncommon to see that. We may also get a baseline and it could show higher results for things that would not be natural, E. coli, for example, which would indicate a problem. In Wyoming, water quality from private wells is not regulated unless it qualifies as a public water system, which means that there's 15 connections or it serves more than 25 people for most of the year. So most private wells aren't going to be public water systems, and the well owner is responsible for quality of water from their well. We work through a voluntary program called Know Your Well to help those well owners understand their water quality, and then, if needed, take best management practices to address water quality issues that they may be seeing from corrals or septic systems or other factors within a watershed. So to answer the question in general, if we found a water quality problem, we would then provide technical assistance to that well owner to see if it's natural and perhaps they need to install treatment in their home, or if there's a factor in the watershed that could be causing a problem with their well, we can provide technical assistance on ways that they could address it.
Thank you. Any follow-up, Representative Riggins?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you. Administrator Zygmunt, one question I have is, this says the department may require, and we heard testimony from Representative Harshman that he believes that 99% of them may not require such a test like this, but in the just the knowledge base that you have in the Department of Environmental Quality, not every LMO would have to be groundwater tested. So do you agree with the testimony from Representative Harshman that most of these will probably not need groundwater testing? It's just another tool in the toolbox if you decide you need to.
Mr. Chairman, I agree that it's another tool in the toolbox. Because water quality has not to date reviewed all LMOs, I have a hard time, I think, giving you an accurate estimate of the number that we see per year that perhaps we would look at and say that there is a need to do water quality testing. I would agree that probably majority would likely not be an issue due to their location or their depths to groundwater. I don't know if I'd go as high as 99% or 90%. I don't know if I can give you a percentage, but I do think most probably would not need water quality. But that's where I think if this bill goes into place, it's important for regulatory certainty to give operators a better understanding of where we would or would not require monitoring via a rule, and establishing through metrics such as depth to groundwater where that monitoring would be required and where it would not, so that it's not just a case-by-case decision.
Thank you. And just one more question. If we amended this, where it says the department may require water quality testing, if we added in there, the department may require the operator to conduct water quality testing, would that alleviate your concerns about an additional FTE or additional appropriations?
Mr. Chairman, we would certainly appreciate that clarification and support that to clarify that it would be the operator taking the sample. If we're applying this across the state, again, in our fiscal impact, we did see the need for an FTE to do the oversight, data management, outreach and education, coordination with management, coordination with the operator. So it would clarify who does what in the bill, but it would not remove the need for anticipated FTE for the program.
Thank you. Representative Knapp.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I was happy to hear about the rules making because so much of this could be public initiated testing versus knowledge of water, location and depth. Would you agree with that, that would be involved in the rules?
Administrator Zygmunt.
Mr. Chairman, that is correct. I anticipate that is what we would clarify in the rule.
Representative Campbell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Zygmunt, or Ms. Zygmunt. My question is, if we were to go ahead and put a metric such as the depth of groundwater in there, and theoretically, because we don't know, would we still require another FTE in order to just accommodate those handful of, because I really do like the idea of having that baseline, because that way we can eliminate a lot of things. But without knowing an actual realistic number of how often that would be used, is it for sure we would need another FTE on there? Or if it was a limited amount of cases, would we be able to get by with existing resources? Thank you.
Administrator Zygmunt.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Yes, if there are a limited number, I think we could get away with existing resources, but that's where it's very hard for me to determine right now. You know, if we said a certain depth to groundwater, how many that would be. I certainly understand the comment. I would need to do further research with my staff in the Land Quality Division to get a better estimate of, does that take 15, 20 LMOs per year down to 1 or 2? Are we still looking around 10? I just can't give you a good answer on that, but in theory, yes.
All right, any other questions? Representative Larson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and this kind of dives down further into the fiscal note and the need for a potential FTE. If we were to leave the responsibility with the department to do the testing, is there a mechanism where the department recoups the cost of having this service, or is this just going to be a service that the state or the department offers for LMOs?
Administrator Zygmunt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, as we contemplated the fiscal note, it would be for the operator taking the samples with us taking some limited samples to verify when needed. If we change that so that we took the sample and then recoup the costs from the operator, I'm sure that there's a mechanism by which we could do that. Again, that would take more rulemaking and, you know, kind of a program structure in order to set that up. But in theory, yes, we could do that.
All right, thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, we are going to recess and we'll pick this up again on Friday. Have some additional public comments and testimony. Representative Harshman.
Mr. Chairman, I think there's some folks that drove down from Casper
Okay.
today. Would it be possible to have their comment
That's
today?
yes, let's hear those that have traveled to be here. I appreciate that. We will have to make it short, but I don't want to close public testimony today. So any citizens that have come down and traveled to be here to talk about this bill, we would like to hear from you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Michael Fernald. I just will be very brief. I just want to say that I do support Mr. Harshman's bill. And I appreciate the comments that you guys have all had about the baseline testing and the questions that have come forth. But I do support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fernald. Any other individuals that have traveled here that, I appreciate you being here. The committee appreciates this, and we don't want to short you from time to be able to to provide public comment. We will carry this on to Friday and have some additional time for public comment.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms.
members of the
Griffith.
board. Yep, I'm Carol Griffith still. And I also would support adding in this baseline testing of water. I guess I would like maybe a little bit of clarification, but maybe that's for a future date, just about if there, I think part of the question I heard earlier was if there was found to be an issue with depth to groundwater, then what? Not just that, oh, there'd be further testing, but if there was found to be that everything's too shallow and you know, running amok out there, you know, that the water's going every which way and it could likely impact, you know, what would be the outcome. But that may be an issue for you to ask possibly on Friday.
Thank you. Ms.
Thank you.
Griffith. Any other individuals that are here that won't be able to be returned on Friday? Seeing none, thank you for your participation. We will look forward to picking this up again on Friday morning. And we're adjourned.